Welcome to the realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. Christian Harwood stepped into the cockpit of the next-generation destruction machine, Bergen 73, and was immediately overcome by a strange feeling. As he settled into the control seat, his fingers glided over the buttons and joysticks, yet everything felt foreign to him. The machine was more than just an instrument. It had become something beyond human engineering, something that pulsed with a presence of its own. It was as if it possessed its own will, something too powerful to be simply piloted by an operator. When he activated the machine, the deep hum of its massive engines filled the air. Bergen 73's advanced scanning systems engaged, projecting a holographic display of the colony's internal structure before him. The scans were precise beyond human perception, detecting even the smallest movement within the ruins. Christian placed his hands firmly on the controls, and the machine responded as though it could read his thoughts, each command executed instantaneously. The first strike launched a plasma bombardment that swept across the colony's outermost structures. Advanced thermal missile systems locked onto bunkers and escape tunnels, ensuring that not a single survivor would escape. The cockpit trembled as explosions rocked the battlefield, but Christian felt nothing. This was just another mission. Hours passed, and when the dust and smoke finally began to settle, the sensors detected a single life form, one last survivor hidden deep within the ruins. Christian's jaw clenched. He had cut through everything like a machine, yet now he hesitated, staring at the control panel of Bergen 73. There was one final move left to make. Christian Harwood had seen war before, had led countless destruction missions, but this was the first time he operated such an advanced weapon. Bergen 73 was a true death machine, outfitted with state-of-the-art plasma scanners, biometric sensors, and thermal weapons powerful enough to level an entire planet's surface. It was a monster born from human engineering, and now it was under his command. The assault on the enemy colony had been nearly flawless. The rival alien faction's settlement was reduced to burning wreckage, its inhabitants obliterated. And yet, despite the overwhelming success, his presence was still required. Summoned to the grand throne room of the man who had orchestrated this war, Christian walked with heavy steps. At the center of the hall sat a figure on a towering metal throne. Clad in silver armor, with long flowing hair and cold, piercing eyes, he exuded an aura of absolute power. Christian Harwood, the man spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "You did well, but your work is not yet finished." Christian frowned. "The assault is complete. My data confirms that nothing significant remains of the colony." The ruler gave a small, knowing smile. "If it were that simple, I wouldn't have called you here." With a flick of his hand, he activated a holographic projection beside the throne. The battlefield was displayed once more, yet flickering red indicators showed movement. Life signs still present. "They are not dead," the ruler stated. "They hid, and before they have a chance to recover, you must erase them entirely. That is why Bergen 73 exists. It was built for this purpose, and I want to see its full potential." Christian inhaled sharply. There was no room for hesitation. To prove himself, he had to finish the job. "I understand," he said. "I'll make sure it's done." Seated once more in the cockpit, Christian felt that same unease creeping into him. The orders were clear, and the soldier in him wanted to carry them out without question. But something deeper, something instinctual, whispered that this mission had already gone too far. As he activated the machine, the console lit up, and automated targeting systems pinpointed the remaining hideouts. With a single press, a massive plasma detonation erupted, shaking the battlefield. Ruins collapsed, shelters disintegrated, and the last remnants of resistance were erased. Bergen 73 had the power to wipe an entire planet from existence, and Christian had been its executioner. When the fires died down, he leaned against the console, exhaling slowly. The mission was over. Upon his return, he was once again summoned to the throne room. This time, the ruler wore a look of satisfaction. "Now," the man said, "your task is complete, and you shall be rewarded." Christian narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" The ruler leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. I am offering you my sister. You have proven your worth to my empire, demonstrated your strength. For that, I want you to be part of my family. As he spoke, the large doors of the throne room swung open. A tall, elegant woman entered. Christian's gaze swept over her ice-blue skin and golden crown hair. She was undeniably of royal blood, yet her expression revealed nothing but quiet resistance. The ruler rose from his throne and approached Christian, his eyes gleaming with control. This is my sister, Zora, he announced. She is the most precious jewel of our lineage. No warrior, no noble has ever touched her. And now, you shall be the first, Christian Harwood. Christian's brow furrowed slightly. Zora, meanwhile, turned her gaze away, bowing her head just slightly, though not in submission, but rather as if trying to hide her true emotions. You will spend the night together in the royal chambers, the ruler continued. Get to know one another. By morning, your fate will be sealed. Christian stood silent for a moment, watching Zora's face. He could sense her unease, the weight of duty pressing down on her. Without a word, she turned and walked toward the exit. Christian followed. The royal chambers were unlike anything he had ever seen. Soft, ambient lights bathed the room in a warm glow. The walls bore intricate designs, and massive windows revealed a breathtaking view of the alien night sky. A grand seating area lay at the center, with a fireplace crackling gently. Zora walked to the window, her arms crossed as she stared out into the vastness beyond. A subtle tremor in her posture betrayed her inner turmoil. Christian approached her carefully. His voice was calm but firm. If you don't want this, we don't have to do anything. She turned slightly, her deep eyes searching his. For a moment, she studied him, then looked away once more. My brother has commanded it, she said quietly. His word is law? Christian didn't respond. He understood what she meant, yet he had no desire to force anything upon her. As the night went on, the tension slowly faded. Zora, at first guarded, eventually spoke in hushed tones. Stories of her people, of palace life, of childhood memories long buried. Christian listened, and in doing so, he felt something shift within himself. At some point, she sat beside him. Her wariness remained, but it was softened by curiosity. On your world, how do such things happen? She asked. Christian thought for a moment. Back home, people choose, he said simply. It happens with desire, not obligation. She was silent for a long time before asking, Are you uncomfortable being here? Christian hesitated before answering honestly. The circumstances make me uncomfortable, but being with you doesn't. A faint flush crossed her face. A quiet moment passed, and then, tentatively, Zora reached out. Her fingertips brushed against his hand, hesitant, testing. Christian did not move, letting her choose. Finally, she leaned in. At first, her lips barely grazed his, but the kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, until the world around them melted away. By morning, Christian woke to find Zora sleeping peacefully beside him. The sound of doors opening startled them both. Christian turned his head sharply, his body instinctively tensing as the heavy doors of the chamber swung open. Zora flinched beside him, her breath hitching as the sudden intrusion shattered the fragile tranquility of the moment. The soft morning light that had bathed the room was now disrupted by the presence of two armored guards stepping inside with silent authority. Behind them, standing tall and imposing, was the king himself. His piercing gaze swept over them, assessing, calculating. Zora straightened, pulling the sheets instinctively around herself as if shielding herself from her brother's scrutiny. Christian, however, met the king's gaze without hesitation. The tension in the room thickened. The king's lips curled into a knowing smirk. It seems the union was successful. His voice carried a sharp undertone, as if this was less a celebration and more a final move in a long-calculated game. Zora lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening on the fabric in her lap. Christian could sense the unease radiating from her, but his own stance remained firm. He would not show weakness before this man. The king exhaled, clasping his hands behind his back. The ceremony will be held at noon. You will be officially announced as part of the royal family." His eyes flickered toward Zora. "And you, sister, will do your duty." She gave the barest nod, but Christian could feel the reluctance in her. The king turned his attention back to Christian. "From this day forth, you are no longer just a soldier. You are bound to the blood of this empire." His gaze darkened slightly, as if warning him of the weight of those words. "Do not forget that." With that, he gestured to the guards, and they exited the room as swiftly as they had come, leaving behind an air of silent expectation. Christian let out a slow breath before turning to Zora. She still hadn't moved. "You don't have to be afraid of him," Christian said softly. Her head snapped up, something almost like anger flashing in her pale blue eyes. "I am not afraid." He studied her for a moment. She had been raised in a world where obedience was demanded, not requested, where love was a foreign concept, traded for alliances and duty. And yet last night had been something else, something real. He reached out, gently touching her wrist. "Then let's do this on our terms." Zora blinked, as if the idea itself was foreign. "What do you mean?" Christian's voice was steady. "If we have to stand in front of the entire empire today and play their game, let's make sure it's a game we control." A flicker of curiosity sparked in her expression. "We can act like they expect us to," he continued, "or we can decide what this really means for us. No matter what happens, I won't force you into anything. But if we stand together today, we do it as equals." Zora searched his face, as if trying to find deception in his words. But she found none. Slowly, cautiously, she nodded. The ceremony was an extravagant affair as expected. The royal hall was lined with banners of deep blue and silver, the empire's crest hanging high above the throne. Rows of nobles stood in attendance, their expressions unreadable as they watched the ceremony unfold. Christian stood tall, dressed in ceremonial black armor with silver engravings, a contrast to the flowing white and gold gown that adorned Zora. She looked regal. But beneath the poised expression, Christian could still see the tension in her shoulders. The king sat on his throne, watching intently as the royal officiant began the formalities. Vows were spoken, hands were clasped, and a golden emblem was pressed into Christian's palm, sealing his place in the royal lineage. When the final words were spoken, a loud chorus of approval erupted from the court. It was done. As they turned to face the crowd, Zora hesitated. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, the chains of expectation tightening around her limbs. Christian noticed. Without a second thought, he reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. The gesture was small, almost insignificant to the watching audience. But to Zora, it was everything. She looked up at him, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Zora felt something that had always been out of reach. Hope.